The Dicastery for the Doctrine of the Faith presented a new document today, entitled Mater Populi Fideles, or the Mother of the Faithful People of God. Termed a doctrinal note, it addresses the theological and pastoral questions. For centuries, the final moments of the Virgin Mary have remained one of the most confusing subjects in Christian history. Her tomb was sealed and protected, and every attempt to study it was denied. Some believed that opening it could confirm ancient traditions, while others warned it might challenge long-standing teachings. If her remains were found, it will reshape historical records. Vatican released a new document, offering clarifications on titles applied to the Blessed Virgin Mary, which have been a point of controversy for many years. If the tomb was empty, the implications would be far harder to explain. When scientists finally gained permission to break the seal, nothing inside matched what they expected. The ancient mystery. Although the mystery surrounding Mary's final moments was well known, the deeper challenge came from how little early sources actually recorded about her last days, and to deepen the understanding of Mary's role in salvation history without obscuring the unique mediation of Christ. The earliest Christian writings focused heavily on her role during Jesus' life, but gave almost no detail about how her own life ended. Later, traditions tried to fill those missing pieces, yet they did not agree with one another. Some described a peaceful death among the apostles. Others claimed she was taken from the world in her physical form. A few early groups even reported that she disappeared during prayer and was never found again. These conflicting accounts left historians with a puzzle that no generation had been able to solve. The confusion turned Mary's fate into more than a matter of faith. It became a serious historical question. Her importance in Christian identity made it necessary for scholars to understand what truly happened. The disappearance or physical departure of someone with such importance would be a major event in human history, so every clue related to her final moments carried weight. Historians searched for documentation. Early believers passed stories through families and local churches. These stories held emotion, fear, and confusion, but they rarely agreed with one another. Some were written centuries after the events they described, which made the truth even harder to confirm. Among all these stories, one location stood out as the most consistent claim. Many traditions pointed to a burial site in the Kidron Valley in Jerusalem. The valley sits between the Old City and the Mount of Olives, a place with long religious significance. It holds graves of prophets and kings. So, the idea that Mary might have been placed there gained strong support. Early travelers wrote that the area carried an unusual silence. According to some local families whose roots date back generations, the site was treated with caution, as if people sensed something unusual about it. The tomb connected to Mary became known as the place that must not be disturbed. A tunnel like this, that stretches from an important religious monument like the tomb of Christ. It even has a shaft straight up to the floor. Ancient Christians guarded it in ways that seemed extreme. Records from early monks show that they kept the entrance sealed and warned visitors not to touch the stone. Their tone expressed deep respect, but also fear. According to some of these accounts, disturbing the tomb could bring consequences no one could explain. There were also rumors passed down through local families that a group of robbers once tried to break into the chamber. None of them were ever found, and only their tools remained scattered near the entrance. This story strengthened the belief that the site carried a danger that should not be tested. This fear, mixed with devotion, kept the tomb sealed long after many other sacred locations were open to study. As debates grew louder and modern tools improved, the real question changed. Researchers no longer asked why the tomb existed. They asked why it had remained untouched in a world that examined everything. That curiosity pushed scholars toward the next stage, the forbidden tomb. As interest in biblical archaeology grew during the 19th and 20th centuries, scholars sent letters to church authorities asking for permission to survey the site. According to archival records, most of these requests were declined without discussion. The tomb was considered too holy to disturb. Some leaders feared that opening it would cause public outrage. Others admitted privately that they worried about what might be found inside. The requests did not stop. New letters arrived every decade. Some came from universities. Some came from private researchers. Few came from government officials who believed the tomb held historical value. The answer was always the same. It was not the right time. The tomb was sacred. The risks were too great. According to reports from church historians, some officials even refused meetings on the subject. They believed the tomb should remain sealed forever. As technology improved, interest increased. Ground scans and remote imaging revealed unusual structures beneath the valley, which raised new questions. Archaeologists argued that studying the tomb could provide insight into the early Christian world. Their proposals were more detailed and more respectful, yet they continued to receive denials. We used a handheld laser scanner, greater than, to document all the stones that were removed from the holy edicule. Some religious leaders believed the tomb was protected for a reason. Others feared that disturbing it might confirm stories that were better left as traditions. The political situation around Jerusalem made the process even harder. Each shift in control brought new rules. Some administrations protected the site to avoid conflict with religious groups. Others simply did not want involvement. This instability created long periods where no new proposals could even be submitted. The turning point came when leadership changed inside the institution that protected the tomb. New authority stepped in. His name was Father Matteo Rinaldi. He was known for his interest in archaeology and for his belief that history and faith could support each other. People close to him said he was cautious, but open to new findings. When scholars brought him fresh proposal, he did not reject it. He studied the documents, spoke with advisors, and asked for strict safety conditions. The review took months. Pressure increased from researchers and media outlets who believed the time for hesitation had passed. Inside the institution, the debate became tense, but Father Rinaldi eventually approved. The excavation under controlled supervision. The announcement surprised both religious leaders and scientists. Preparations began quickly. History of the Doctrine of the Faith said that this document has a special value that is superior to those security teams were assigned to guard the site. Equipment was shipped in. Experts traveled to Jerusalem. By the time the excavation team reached the valley, the atmosphere had changed. Everyone sensed they were about to enter a moment that would be remembered for a long time. Breaking the seal. On the morning of the excavation, the atmosphere around the Kidron Valley changed. The team of scientists and archaeologists gathered near the sealed entrance, and even the most experienced members looked uneasy. According to reports, some of them admitted that the task felt heavier than any excavation they had attempted before. Cameras, equipment, and officials stood ready, but the group paused in silence for several minutes. They knew the stone in front of them had remained untouched for centuries, and each person understood the weight of what they were about to do. The process began slowly. The team worked with careful precision as they placed tools along the edge of the ancient slab. They avoided force and relied on steady pressure to loosen it. The stone resisted at first, as if it had settled deeper into its place over time. Every small movement was monitored and recorded. The team feared causing damage that could erase historical details. According to one witness at the site, the sound of the tools echoing through the valley made everyone tense. Each strike seemed louder than expected, as though the stone was reacting to the disturbance. As the stone shifted, the carvings surrounding the entrance became more noticeable. The team had documented them earlier, but under the new angle of the work lights, they appeared clearer. Some members of the group later reported that the carved figures seemed to tilt toward the workers. The faces of angels, saints, and guardians appeared sharper, almost as if they were observing the process. This created an unsettling feeling among several members of the team. A few stepped back to steady their nerves before continuing. When the slab finally moved, a quiet current of air escaped from inside the tomb. It brought with it a strange scent. It was faint, but unmistakable. The scientists described it as the smell of candle smoke. The disturbing part was that no flame had burned there for an unknown number of centuries. The scent lingered long enough to unsettle the group, before it faded away. Flashlights were raised as the opening widened. The light did not travel far. The darkness inside felt unusually dense. Instead of scattering when the beams hit it, the shadows absorbed the light and held their shape. This effect confused some members of the team. They checked their equipment, but found no malfunction. The darkness simply behaved in a way that none of them expected. The first steps inside revealed a narrow passage that descended deeper than the initial ground scan suggested. The stone steps were worn, but stable, and they led downward into a space that felt older than the entrance. As the team moved further inside, their lights revealed faint paintings on the walls. The images showed simple early Christian symbols. Some looked like fish shapes. Others resembled small crosses and palm branches. There were also figures that appeared to be people standing with raised hands in prayer, although the details had faded over time. One painting seemed to show a group of women carrying jars. Another looked like a lone figure standing beside a larger shape that might have been a doorway or a shrine. What unsettled the group was how these paintings changed when viewed from different angles. In one position, the images looked dull and flat. In another, the colors appeared sharper, almost as if the paint had been touched recently. This effect had no clear explanation, and several members of the team stepped closer to check their lights, unsure if the brightness was shifting or if the paintings themselves were reacting to the illumination. The deeper the team went, the stronger the sense of tension became. The combination of the scent, the unnatural darkness, and the shifting artwork created a growing sense of dread. Each person felt that they were approaching something that had been hidden for a reason. But as deep as the descent felt, nothing prepared them for what waited at the bottom. The first great shock. The passage widened until the team stepped into the deepest chamber. Earlier scans had shown several hidden rooms under the valley, but this one stood out as the most complex. The walls carried more markings than any they had seen, and the air felt heavier the moment they entered. The group understood they had reached the heart of the tomb, and the tension rose sharply as they moved toward the large stone structure at the center. The sarcophagus dominated the room. It was heavier and larger than expected, and its lid sat perfectly aligned with the base. There were no cracks or signs of tampering. The stone looked untouched since the day it was sealed. The lead archaeologist instructed everyone to remain calm. Technicians checked their equipment, fastened the lifting straps, and prepared to raise the lid with slow, steady movements. No one wanted to make a mistake. The lid lifted without resistance. As soon as it shifted, a thin breath of stale air escaped. Lights moved over the interior, and the team froze. The sarcophagus was completely empty. The inside showed smooth stone with no fragments of cloth, no bones, and no burial items. Nothing suggested that a body had ever been placed there. The silence that followed was tense. Several members stepped closer, unsure if they were seeing correctly. The lead archaeologist examined the inner edges. There were no scratch marks. There was no disturbed stone dust. There was no evidence of forced entry. Since the entrance to the chamber had been sealed for centuries, the chances of removal were extremely small. Some team members tried to explain the emptiness. They suggested that the remains might have been moved long ago. They discussed the possibility of theft, pointing to unverified local stories about stolen relics from the valley. Others argued that grave robbers always leave signs. Tools, shifted stones, and disturbed surfaces always reveal their work. None of those indicators appeared here. A few archaeologists raised a different idea. They pointed out that several Christian traditions claim Mary's body never remained in the world. According to them, an empty tomb would fit that narrative, although none of them were willing to make that conclusion without evidence. The suggestion created tension because it hinted at a possibility far beyond normal archaeological explanations. A few suggested that the wrong tomb had been identified, but that idea collapsed quickly. Scans matched the chamber's position with old pilgrim records. The inscriptions and layout were consistent with descriptions passed down for centuries. All evidence pointed to this being the correct site. Frustration and disbelief spread through the group. Some expressed anger, not toward anyone present, but toward the complete lack of answers. Procedures continued. Photographs were taken. Samples were collected. Yet, the emptiness remained the central issue. If a burial never occurred here, then something else had happened before the tomb was sealed. This realization changed the tone of the entire mission. As the team began to search the rest of the chamber, new discoveries suggested the tomb contained far more than an empty coffin, evidence of a divine event. The shock of the empty sarcophagus pushed the team to search every part of the chamber. Their lights swept across the stone floor and caught something lying close to the far wall. It was a folded burial cloth. The fabric looked fragile, but its patterns were clear. Golden lines formed shapes that were simple, but precise. According to textile experts on the team, the weaving style resembled early 1st century work. The presence of gold in the thread made it even more unusual. It suggested that whoever was meant to rest here held rare importance. A few steps from the cloth, a stone tablet leaned against the wall. Dust had settled over it, but the carvings underneath were sharp. The inscriptions were written in Aramaic and Greek. These were languages used during the early years of Christianity. As the team brushed away the dirt, the writing became clearer. The words did not read like a prayer. They read like a record. A few lines described a moment when light filled the place. Another line mentioned a voice or presence that could not be named. The team documented each section with growing unease. The carvings on the walls added to the tension. Once more light was directed at them, the figures became easier to see. The images showed Mary surrounded by shapes that looked like celestial beings. Their hands were placed under her arms and shoulders, lifting her upward. The artwork was simple and aged, but the meaning behind it was direct. It did not show grief or a traditional burial. It showed an ascent. As they continued to examine the chamber, the team noticed something strange about the placement of all the relics. They were not scattered as they would be after a robbery or collapse. Every item seemed arranged with intention. The cloth had been folded neatly. The tablet had been placed securely in a corner. The carvings were positioned to face the central sarcophagus. The arrangement felt deliberate, almost ceremonial. One inscription stood out more than the others. It described a witness who saw the heavens open. His words suggested an event that caused fear and awe at the same time. Near that passage was a name carved with clear strokes. It read, Thomas. This detail brought immediate attention. According to some members of the team, the preservation felt unnatural. Every object carried a clarity that defied expectations. With each detail, the team felt a stronger suspicion forming. These relics did not describe a simple burial. They pointed to a moment that seemed to defy natural explanation. But relics, no matter how powerful, were only objects. What came next was no artifact. It was something the living researchers felt, heard, and saw. The tomb reacts. The deeper the team studied the relics, the more the atmosphere inside the tomb changed. According to several researchers, a heavy sensation settled over the chamber, as if unseen eyes were following their movements. Some members of the team tried to ignore it, but others stopped working and looked around with clear discomfort. At least 2 people stepped back toward the entrance without saying a word. They later admitted that the feeling of being watched became so strong that it felt physical. The emotional shift happened suddenly. It came in waves that affected different people at different times. One researcher reported feeling a rush of awe, strong enough to bring tears. Another felt an overwhelming sadness that made it difficult to speak. A third described a sharp fear that rose without warning. None of these reactions were visible on the equipment. There were no temperature drops or gas readings to explain it. The emotions appeared without any natural cause. Then came the whispers. The first person to mention them thought he was imagining things. He claimed he heard the soft voice near the far wall. When he turned, no one was there. Minutes later, 2 other team members reported hearing faint sounds that resembled words. The team activated audio devices and placed them around the chamber. Nothing was captured. Every recording remained silent. The whispers were heard by human ears, but never appeared on any device. Lights that had been steady since the start of the excavation began to flicker. At first, it looked like a typical equipment issue. The team checked the connections and power sources. All were stable. Only the lights inside the tomb malfunctioned. Lights outside the chamber and in the hallway worked without interruption. Scanners and monitors inside the tomb shut down without warning, then returned to normal once removed from the chamber. The pattern repeated until the team was forced to admit that the issue was not mechanical. The floor added another layer of tension. Several people felt a faint vibration beneath their boots. It did not resemble an earthquake or a structural shift. It moved in a pulse, steady and measured, like something alive. The vibration continued for several seconds, then stopped as abruptly as it began. When the team placed sensors on the stone, the readings showed nothing unusual. The instruments detected no movement at all. The most disturbing moment came from a camera placed near the empty sarcophagus. A photographer reviewing images froze in shock. One of the photos showed a faint shape standing above the coffin. It was not a solid figure. It looked like a soft outline of light, barely formed, but clearly present. According to those who saw the image, the shape did not resemble any team member. The next photo in the sequence showed an empty space. At that point, fear spread through the group in a way no one could hide. The pattern was impossible to ignore. The presence seemed intelligent. It reacted when people entered certain areas of the chamber. It stopped equipment, but not at random. It created emotional reactions that matched the parts of the tomb being examined. The final conclusion filled the room with dread. The tomb did not hold a body. It held the active imprint of an event that defied natural explanation. Something powerful had taken place there, and a trace of it still remained. News of the phenomenon traveled faster than any relic, and soon, the discovery attracted the attention of those who had the most to lose and the most to fear. Global shock and Vatican silence. News of the discovery spread quickly through academic and religious networks. Within a short time, small groups began gathering near the Kidron Valley. Local authorities reported that the number of visitors increased far beyond what the area usually received. People stood near the path leading to the tomb, speaking quietly and waiting for updates. Some held candles, others prayed. A few remained silent, unsure of how to interpret what they had heard. Pilgrims arrived in steady numbers. Many approached the sealed entrance with caution. Some knelt, while others stood back and watched from a distance. A few visitors admitted they felt drawn to the site, although they could not explain why. The atmosphere around the valley became tense and expectant. The Vatican responded with a short statement. It acknowledged that the reports from the excavation were serious, but urged the public to remain patient. It stressed that the Church would wait for verified information before making further comments. There were no confirmations and no rejections, which created more questions than answers. Inside academic and religious circles, the debates grew intense. Theologians disagreed on how the findings should be interpreted. Some historians argued that the discovery might affect long-held teachings. Scientists involved in the project requested ongoing access to the chamber, stating that more testing was required. Several clergy members argued that continued intrusion might cause unnecessary disturbance. These differences created visible tension between the groups. Speculation increased as more people learned about the situation. According to unverified discussions online, some believed the Vatican had long suspected that the tomb held unusual findings. Others questioned whether additional documents existed in private archives. None of these claims were confirmed, yet they added to the sense of uncertainty. By this point, opinions were divided. Some people believed the empty tomb supported the idea that Mary's body had left the world, just as certain traditions teach. Others argued that the discovery proved nothing without physical evidence. If you enjoyed this video, remember to like and subscribe.